We will have other panelists to join us today. In fact, the Vice-President of the Republic of the Philippines will also be coming today. God willing, a ranking leader of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front will sit down with us later today. Tapatan sa Aristocrat celebrates its third anniversary today, and without your support, without your presence, we would not have lasted all these years. We've discussed issues of the day, from family planning to Bangsamoro Basic Law, the issues about the South China Sea, Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, and a lot more. Heated discussion happened when we talked about the controversial K-12 program of the government. We also talked about the land reform program. And one of the most passionate guests we had is now DAR Secretary Rafael Mariano. As we welcome colleagues from various media entities, the members of the Diplomatic Corps, friends who have supported Tapatan's Aristocrat since its first edition, we say thank you. And in our region, in Bicol, we say Diyos mabalo sa Indogabos. And we also request for your prayers for our guests who have gone to the great beyond. One of them is the great Maning Almario, who passed away some years ago. July 4 is a significant day for us because this is what's been called as the Philippine-American Friendship Day. Are we really friends with the Americans? That is one good question. Sky, good morning.
Good morning. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. And happy anniversary, especially to our friends from the media here. It's been 3 years that we have been doing Tapatan sa Aristocrat. And we'd like to thank you. It has been only a dream of Areopagos Communications to do this, but then it has lasted for 3 years. And we have discussed a lot. We have been through a lot as well. And we've never missed a week, even for a week in Tapatan sa Aristocrat. As well as we also would like to tell everyone that we're live on Facebook today. So please tell your friends they can also watch us at Tapatan sa Aristocrat Facebook page. So good morning to all and thank you for being here.
We'd like to say thank you to our friends from Meralco, from Manila Water, McKinney Food Products, and others who wished as well. We have some tokens for you after the show. Okay? So let's begin. I cannot introduce the man to my left because he's already well known. In fact, I may be that old because he started young in government. I first met him in 1995, 1996 when he was chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And I covered him for Radio Veritas. Incidentally, today is my anniversary with Veritas. This is my first day when I worked in 1994.
Oh, congratulations.
And mind you, the first thing I did was to interview then Secretary Franklin Drilon. And the topic was about the Manila Film Festival. And you know what it means, okay? So let's start the ball rolling, Mr. Secretary. Give us your remarks. How is it today? What is the program? What is the policy, foreign policy of the Duterte administration?
Thank you. Thank you, Melo. Thank you, everybody. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. When my would-be appointment was announced much earlier, I went into a series of rigorous briefings with the Department of Foreign Affairs to acquaint myself with the job because I said to everybody who asked me that I was prepared to hit the ground running. I must confess, however, that on day one, when I assumed the office, I had the runs. And it was not in that context that I meant that I would be hitting the ground running, but I'd like to assure you that it was not because of any feelings of anxiety or nervousness in accepting or performing this job, but it was just simply because I ate the wrong food that day. In any event, I'd like to go direct to the point and make this very brief statement in connection with certain controversies that have arisen during the past few days. In my first official press conference last week, a reporter asked, Are you afraid of China? In answer, I replied with a rhetorical question. Why should we be afraid of China? The hall fell momentarily silent while reflecting a collective response. Flashed through my mind were the words, "There is nothing to fear but fear itself." I sense the robust heart of a country that has witnessed acts of courage and valor in times when our shores were invaded, and those times when our sovereignty and freedom were threatened. We who are engaged in the noble tasks of diplomacy carry that heart of courage everywhere. We must show it in many areas of cooperation with all nations. We will strictly adhere to the rule of law and be resolute in upholding our sovereignty rights and right of self-determination. We gallantly seek peace, not war. And yes, we must put it to work in multilateral or bilateral negotiations. And to paraphrase another world leader, let me say that we do not fear to negotiate, and we do not negotiate out of fear. Thank you.
So let's start the ball rolling. It's been reported, Mr. Secretary, that the tribunal will come up with a decision on the 12th of July. What do you think would be the decision? Have you consulted Madame Auring or any of the fortune tellers? But what are the signs?
I would not speculate on what will be the decision of the arbitral tribunal, although I would hope that our position will be sustained and an award will be made in our favor. But I would like to make sure that before making any statements about what the decision is going to be, I would like to first wait for that decision. As you said, it's going to come out on July 12 as announced, and we would like to study very closely the effects and coverage of that decision. And after we will have studied it, we will make a definite statement and we will act accordingly in accordance with our Constitution and with our laws. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But you see, on another plane, Mr. Secretary, it's been reported that terrorism has reared its ugly face in so many countries where there are also Filipinos. Is there any marching order from the President how to further protect Filipino workers in these areas?
The fight against terrorism is a collective effort, and I think we are and we will continue to be a strong part of that effort in quelling terrorism, in fighting terrorism wherever it shows its ugly head, as you said. Our marching orders from the President is to make sure that these kinds of activities will be strongly opposed and by the government of the Philippines, and that we will be part of the efforts in stopping it. We hope that terrorism, as it might appear in our shores, will likewise be firmly addressed by us. There is no place for terrorism in our land or in any part of the world. So that is what we are committed to do.
Has there been any marching order from the President to also look into the possibility that there are foreigners in southern Philippines who may be instigating our brother Muslims to take violent actions against not only the government, but the Filipino citizens?
I am sure our military authorities, our police authorities, and our intelligence community is on top of the situation, and they are aware of what are the true facts on the ground. And rest assured that we will not hesitate to express our position and our opposition to any foreign interference into our domestic affairs within our territorial borders.
So with the foreign affairs right now, sir, what will be your priority when it comes to the Filipino citizen?
I have my marching orders coming from the President on that. The first being that we must make sure that our overseas Filipino workers' needs and problems are specially and adequately addressed. We want to make sure that from the very day or first day that the recruitment processes start, up to the time that they arrive in their point of destination, we will be ready and available to help them in their needs. We know that as they go abroad, they will be subject to a lot of difficulties, uncertainties, and vulnerabilities. And the least that we can do for our overseas workers, who in a true sense are our economic heroes, is to make ourselves readily available for their service. We will also like to make sure that other services that we render to the public, especially with regards to the issuance of travel documents, passports, and other documentations needed for the free passage and travel of our people, will be cut to the minimum in terms of red tapes. Our President has said that he will not tolerate any lines or any queuing of the public, particularly also with our overseas Filipino workers. Insofar as the DFA is concerned, we will cut short the process that is not necessary in the grant of these passports or travel documents. We will also be closely coordinating with the other agencies of government to make sure that they will be keyed into these efforts of streamlining the processes in granting these services to our people.
But Secretary, how do we deal with our neighbors? We have the defense agreement, border crossing agreement with Indonesia in 1975, which allows Indonesian troops in hot pursuit into our areas. No? So how will we deal with them? How do we deal with Malaysia, who is also suffering from terrorism?
Well, we have trilateral agreements that are in the process, and within the next, hopefully within the next few weeks or so, this will be finalized. This includes agreements to secure our common borders, these waters in the south particularly that have been always the subject of abduction and piracy. These agreements are geared towards precisely addressing these problems. In the event that there will be some delay insofar as forging these trilateral agreements, we are also preparing for an agreement, bilateral agreement with Indonesia in response to the latest abduction of 7 Indonesian workers. And this is in the works. Our military authorities, our police authorities, our intelligence community is also on top of this, and very soon we hope that we will have this kind of agreement that will secure our borders.
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge Ambassador Ancomienda has already joined us. Okay, so I have to move to the right. Then, Ms. Ambassador, welcome. Secretary, let's go back to our neighbors. How do we deal with Sabah, the Sabah issue?
The Sabah issue officially has been set aside in the back burner. Not that we have abandoned our claims to Sabah. We are firm in pursuing it at the appropriate time in the future. But there are more pressing problems that we face today, particularly with Malaysia. And this we would like to make sure that we'll address on that prioritized basis. As I understand it, even from the time of President Cory Aquino through President Fidel Ramos, we had wanted to establish what is known as an IAGA, or that involve countries like Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines in creating an East Asia growth area in the South. We would like to pursue this to the hilt. Make sure that mutual cooperation will ensure the development and advancement of our peoples in this region. And once this is addressed, once we have also addressed the security concerns in that area, we should be able, and it should be easier for us to deal with our claims to Sabah. In the meantime, we are prioritizing our problems, we are prioritizing the steps that we'll be taking, but rest assured that not only are we not abandoning our claim to Sabah, the law mandates that it continues and must be pursued at the proper time.
Secretary, are you optimistic the ASEAN economic community will still come to reality considering that Britain has already left the European Union?
Oh, whether or not Britain has left the European Union, which is their concern and the concern of the United Kingdom and maybe the European Union, the ASEAN nations will continue to work together in joint efforts to address our mutual and common concerns in the area. I do not believe that it has any direct impact on our ability to forge that kind of a cooperative arrangement with all of the nations that are members of ASEAN.
Okay, we'll open the floor to our friends from the media who may have questions for the good secretary because he's here on a very limited time. Okay, so we'll open the floor. Yes, Ellen Tordesillas is acknowledged. Can we, Ellen, can you please move to the microphone?
Sir, in the first cabinet meeting, you were heard when you asked the president what the dilemma that the Philippines has. Like, if you win, if the Philippines gets a favorable ruling from the UN Arbitral Tribunal, which is declared the Scarborough Shoal part of the Philippine EEZ, what if China, hits back and again closes access of the Scarborough Shoal to Filipino fishermen? You asked that question. May we know what was the answer? Because that was a point when the live streaming was cut off. So what's the decision now of the Philippines when the Duterte government when it happens? Another thing is you also mentioned that some countries are very particular about the freedom of navigation, which you did not mention the countries, but we know that you're referring to the US and Japan, that they expressed concern, and they requested the Philippines to issue strong statements against China, and you said that you told them that you don't feel that you will not be doing that. So what was the reaction of both the U.S. government and other governments that asked you that made that request?
Well, first, Ellen, let me tell you that I made those statements not to make any policy statement or not to make any decision with respect to what we will do, other than to emphasize how important it is for us to make sure that before we make any statements, we have to wait for the decision of the arbitral tribunal. That was the thrust of our conversation on that evening. And I emphasized that while we are waiting for that decision, we cannot make any provocative or strong statements that will only serve the purpose of exacerbating or heighten the tensions. As we said, and as I've said, we would like to make sure that when the arbitral tribunal's decisions come out, we will fully understand what it means when we say that we have won that decision or we have lost in that case. There is also a possibility that we may win some or lose some. We are not categorically saying, and we do not have any inside information about what the arbitral tribunal will do or will award. But there is a possibility that the award might involve an overlapping of claims. So it is very important, and I think it is the more prudent step to take, that we should not take on such aggressive action. Now, if after the arbitral tribunal decision comes about and any nation will take aggressive actions insofar as what has been declared as our rights in that exclusive economic zone or our maritime entitlements there, we will act accordingly. We are not afraid of anybody. We cannot and we will not compromise our territorial integrity or our sovereignty. But having said that, it is still important to make sure that we will hope for the best and would not make any provocative statements or strong statements at this time that will not help us any bit.
Sir, the second question about the FON, the freedom.
Yes, I also realize that the international community as a whole, and we appreciate that, have already mentioned their interests in securing that area for freedom of navigation and overflights operation. And that is very important. They have also urged, the international community I mean, that we should respect the rule of law and international law when the decision of the arbitral tribunal comes about. That is a statement that we support. But what they are doing in saying this is also to promote their particular national interests. They are doing this because that area that is disputed, about 60% of world trade and commerce ply that route, and it is important for them to make sure that freedom of navigation is secured in that area. For us, the Constitution mandates that we will always act and carry out our foreign policy in an independent manner so that in doing so, the paramount national interest of the Philippines will also be pursued. And we would make sure that in carrying out that paramount national interest, we will work closely with the community of nations in seeing how we can secure and achieve our mutual interests as well.
Thank you. Sir, last na lang, sir. Sir, during the campaign kasi, President Duterte was saying that he will jet ski to the nearest island in the Spratlys and plant a Philippine flag there. Since he said that no taunting, no flaunting, do we mean that wala na yon? Wala na yung jet ski?
We must remember, Ellen, that when the president said that, he said that before he was even elected as president. He was acting on the basis of, I think what he was expressing here is just simply that our national policy renounces war. Our Constitution renounces war as an instrument of national policy. And he knows that we cannot engage anybody or a superpower like China, the United States, or anyone else into a war. We cannot do that. But we will be firm in making sure that our territorial integrity and our sovereignty is protected. But we will not hesitate to pursue negotiations in the settlement of our disputes. We will not be aggressive or provocative in our tact in achieving this objective.
Thank you very much. We have a colleague from GMA7, Maki Pulido.
Good morning, sir. Secretary, just your thoughts, or if we're going to take any steps, because China is planning to hold military drills in the area of Paracel Islands from July 5 to July 11, right before the tribunal issues its decision.
You're asking if the Philippines will take any steps?
Are you going to file a diplomatic protest? What are your thoughts about this, Secretary?
Whatever action any nation will take in international waters, I believe they can do, provided that they will not impede the freedom of navigation and overflight operations. Even if, for instance, the arbitral tribunal will declare that that area is part of our exclusive economic zone, it is nevertheless part of international waters. It is in the same breath that if they would like to conduct this kind of military exercise, that any other country, including the United States, can conduct military exercise in these international waters, in the Pacific and in such other international waters in the world. So I do not see why while the Philippines will make any statements along that line, or will be concerned along that line, or will be agitated along that line, because that is the right of every country to do. In any event, we will of course take the appropriate steps in ensuring that freedom of navigation will not be impeded, along with the members of the international community.
Sir, last question. Associate Justice Antonio Carpio outlined several proposals in the event that the tribunal rules in favor of the Philippines, and China, of course, because of its talagang decision na not to follow any decision from the tribunal. He outlined several options, one of which was, for example, protesting the seabed exploration of China. If China doesn't follow the tribunal and the Philippines wins in the tribunal. Do you agree in the options that were outlined by Associate Justice Carpio, sir?
Well, if you will notice what Justice Carpio had said, it is conditioned upon what comes out in the decision of the arbitral tribunal. And when we have fully gotten the decision and studied it, we will act accordingly and appropriately. If, under the circumstances, the recommendation or options laid out by Justice Carpio is the appropriate thing to do, by all means, let's do it.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Magandang umaga po, Mr. Secretary. Since you started your remarks by narrating the question of one reporter, aren't you afraid of China? I'd like to rephrase or reframe that question. Aren't you afraid of the United States of America?
Yeah, I will also be asking, reiterating the same rhetorical question. Why should we be afraid of the United States of America?
Yes. Well, some would say that the history of the U.S. and the Philippines would be advised, the Philippine government would be advised to be more careful with the U.S. since they have helped depose Marcos, Erap, and others. But I have my second question is, where did Duterte and you train in acrobatics? Because you are doing your trapeze, your tightrope walk, diplomatic tightrope walk, pretty well, I think. And so that is a congratulations so far. But thirdly, to go beyond the China Sea, because there's a greater foreign policy issue at stake here, and very few people in the Philippines discusses this. And that is whether the Philippines can open its eyes, and the Duterte government and the Department of Foreign Affairs open its eyes to the central question today in foreign policy. Will the Philippines be able to subscribe to the multipolar world versus the unipolar world, which is inheritance from the Cold War, where the U.S. is the sole superpower. And I think that is one frontier in diplomacy that the Philippine government and the Department of Foreign Affairs should think about, because the world is changing. We are in an Asian century, and yet the Philippines is still considered a surrogate of the United States of America.
Thank you for your question. I would like just to tell you that the chief architect of our foreign policy is the President of the Philippines. He directs and orchestrates our foreign policy, and we in the Foreign Affairs Department articulate this policy and implement it for him. But even as the President is the sole architect of our foreign policy, he is also mandated by the Constitution and can only operate within the framework of the Constitution. And our Constitution says that we must carry out an independent foreign policy. And we will, in carrying out this foreign policy, we will always be subject to the shifts in events and developments in the area, and see what will be in the best national interests in carrying out this foreign policy within the framework of that constitutional limitation. So in response to your question, we will be bound by that, and rest assured that under this Duterte administration, we will be responsive to the demands and changes in the geopolitical world to make sure that the paramount interests of the Philippines and the general welfare of the Filipinos will be carried out.
Incidentally, the good secretary is good for 5 more minutes. Questions from FOCAP? Questions? Sige. Paterno, the one who asked, are we afraid of China?
Hello, Mr. Secretary. Paterno Esmaquel from Rappler. Mr. Secretary, about improving our ties with China, what are the ways by which you think Filipinos, the ordinary Filipinos, can benefit from an improved relationship with China?
The Philippines and the Filipinos will certainly benefit a lot from maintaining amity with all nations, not only China. Particularly with China, if it offers us certain, actions or assistance in carrying out the development of our infrastructure projects, or in pursuing trade relationships, we will welcome this. We know that this will be beneficial for our people. But we must also not just take this hook, line, and sinker. We must always make sure that in doing so, we will be carrying and pursuing and preserving the paramount national interest. So, and we will do this not only for China. We will do this for the United States. We will do this for Japan. We will do this for all countries who would like to be friends with us and who would like to maintain good, cordial relationships, including along the lines of advancement and economic or trade relationships.
Mr. Secretary, you said something interesting. We will not take it hook, line, and sinker. So if China offers these projects in exchange, for example, for dropping our case or our claim over the West Philippine Sea, how would the Philippines react?
Let me ask you, sir, would you think that that would be consistent in promoting the paramount national interests? That is the question that we will always be trying to resolve in addressing these situations, problems, and concerns. The paramount national interest cannot be compromised. Thank you. I will have to leave. I wish I could stay longer. I have some other commitments.
Yeah. One last question from Ignacio D. Please, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Last Friday, it was reported that you had a meeting with your counterpart from Indonesia, Minister Retno Marsudi. Could we get anything from you regarding your talks with her, and did part of your talks cover the status of the 7 Indonesian sailors being held captive and the coal moratorium shipment?
Yes, but first and foremost, he came in to congratulate me. Second, he discussed the abduction, and we are doing our best in making sure that the safety, the paramount safety of the victims are secured. We also talked about the coal moratorium, and we also discussed ways and means to make sure that this embargo can be lifted as soon as possible. Our military authorities are pursuing our agreements or bilaterals with Indonesia in making sure that the lifting of this embargo and how we would be able to expeditiously release the victims safe from harm will be achieved. Wait for developments along that line. There are certain things that we cannot divulge at this point in time, but you will understand that this is very important in making sure that we will be able to achieve our objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May we just request the good secretary for picture taking? Don't you go away. Pag-uusapan natin yung South China Sea with the ambassador in just a short while. All right, we'll begin. Mga kaibigan, isa po sa ating panauhin ay dating ambassador, si Ambassador Alberto Ancomienda. Siya po ay isa sa mga dalubhasa, is one of our experts as far as the law of the sea is concerned. I'd like to ask the good expert with us today of his views about statements made by Senior Associate Justice Carpio about getting the case into the tribunal. Was it a right step? Anyway, the decision will be coming out in a matter of days. So, Mr. Ambassador, what are your thoughts about the South China Sea issue?
Firstly, I'd like to greet everybody. Good morning and congratulate Tapatan on its third anniversary. I apologize that I was late. It was not the traffic; it was the taxi who came late. and dalawa?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Okay lang. English na lang natin. Sige, okay.
I have just been upgraded to the center seat of the table. I don't know whether to feel flattered, but and also by the introduction of Mr. Acuna. But okay, the question is about the South China Sea. Let's go into that right away. But I would like, before I go to whatever. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Before I go to the point that was asked by Mr. Acuna in regard to the comments of Justice Carpio, I would like to take up from where Secretary Yasay left off, I was glad to hear what I heard from him this morning because ito tapatan ito, no? So let's be candid about the whole thing. Because leading to the inauguration of President Duterte, Yasay seemed to be taking a stronger stance in regard to the South China Sea. At that, of course, I was not comfortable. But when President Duterte, on his inauguration, I would like to point out a few things on inauguration day. Number one, his inaugural speech, he only said a motherhood statement in regard to foreign policy, that we will observe all agreements by the Philippines. Then, that was all he said in his inaugural speech. Then, an hour later, he was into his cabinet meeting, and of course, the first cabinet meeting, which was made public, was to set the tone of his government from that point on. And as reported in the, I don't know if there are Philippine Star journalists here, I just picked it up from the Philippine Star report, there are a few things that really, if you ask me, my opinion, I thought were very good points. Number one, that no taunting or strong words against China. I think that's very important at this time. Number two, we await the results of the tribunal. The results will be out in another 7 days' time, but I think we should heed what the President said. let's keep quiet about this, speculating about the substance of the tribunal, because if I may just explain this, if I have the time, I'm a lawyer, and in domestic law, I'm a lawyer, and in domestic law, we Philippines uses we have the principle of, I was about to say the Latin term, but when a court is before the, when a case is before the court, nobody talks about it. In sub judice, yes, okay. Then I can use the term sub judice. If a case is sub judice, nobody talks about the substance, at least, of the case. And this is a very careful way to prevent the opinions of the judge from being influenced by outsiders. In a way, this is also followed in common law countries like the United States. That's why a jury is always sequestered. They are not even allowed to watch television. So, from the beginning, when we filed this case, we should have kept quiet about especially the substance. But that was not the case. That was not the case of the government. That was not the case of our supposed international supporters who were the ones very loudly advocating the rule of law. Now, we have only a space of about 7 days. I really think we should follow the President's request that we keep quiet about it. But while awaiting the decision of the tribunal, it's good, what the President said. Also, we quiet the atmosphere. No strong words against China, no hard comments about the issues. Now, beyond that, the third point that really I like very much, which what President Duterte said, was we will review the situation. I mean, before this government took over, up to the very last few days of the Aquino administration, the last administration was pushing for continuation of the tribunal. This was before it was clear that the decision was coming out on July 12. That sort of discomfited me for the simple reason that a new government coming into place needs to review what has happened before, and in fact what is its future course in relation to what it has been saying during the campaign. But to push for a non-review, I'm glad that President Duterte did not pick up that line. So President Duterte said, we must review, and if you look at the news reports again, he directed all government agencies to do its own review, so that he will have a collective review thereafter, especially after the decision comes down. Fifth point that I wish to point out from the statement of the President. The case is a cliffhanger. Now again, tapatan ito, and we may have in some ways to review what happened before. The airwaves was just really so very heavy with one-liners that we had no choice but to resort to arbitration. We have done more than 50 sessions with China. Even Secretary Del Rosario. All my comments comes from the newspaper reports. I always say I am retired. I no longer have inside information, so I follow the newspaper trail. Okay, and even Secretary Del Rosario said that during his term he undertook 151 trips abroad to sell the arbitration. Now, I don't know if this really can figure out in a span of 6 years in regard to diplomacy. But those are the things. More than 50 interactions with China and 151 trips by Secretary Del Rosario. And so we had to go to arbitration. Now, Let me go back to what I said. President Duterte's assessment is this is a cliffhanger. And for heaven's sake, can it be otherwise? The Philippines had so many issues that was presented to the tribunal. The way the previous administration, I'm not critical of the previous administration for the sake of criticizing. I'm just talking about the South China Sea issues and how it was handled by the previous administration. Now, if you look at the sound bites and the, public diplomacy of the previous administration, the DFA at the time, number one, we are sure to win the case. So, number two, China should follow the decision, otherwise it will be, an international pariah. That was a very strong line. The point is, what we submitted to the International Court of Arbitration, Permanent Court of Arbitration, is not a question that can be answered with true or false. As Secretary Yasay said now, this time following the lead of President Duterte, there are so many issues there. It's not a simple case even that, rewind a bit. What was our mantra? What is ours, meaning sovereignty. But when the case was submitted to arbitration, we still maintained the mantra of what is ours, but they have been explaining that we are not looking at ownership or sovereignty. We are looking, because if that is our direction, we cannot bring it to the International Court of Justice because China will not agree to that. And there is a chance to bring it to a third-party settlement if the issue in regard to UNCLOS is not sovereignty but interpretation of UNCLOS. Now, so our case before UNCLOS is interpretation of the maritime entitlement, jurisdictional entitlements. The spin of the previous administration was, yes, we are forced to do this, but anyway, we are sure to win it. And so, we have to look forward to how to deal with China. I'm sorry, I have to give a sort of a tour de horizon of what transpired in the last administration, hopefully as an introduction to our Tapatan this morning.
Yeah. Yes, Ambassador?
Okay, can I continue? So, that is where we are now. One, we are faced with the fact that the tribunal's decision is coming down in about a week's time. The second fact is a more recent event, the assumption of the presidency by President Duterte. What to do from now on? This question was asked earlier. Again, just to set the atmosphere for our Tapatan today, there was word that we should continue our relationships with China in the normal way. Business and trade should proceed because they say this is different, a different aspect in our relationship with China than the claims in this Pratt list. Fine, that's easy to say, that's nice to say, that's nice to hear. But when you say that we proceed with trade and business with China, is that really possible with the way we are pursuing and sounding with our claims? You know, we are fighting China and we pursue and we want, it's like we want to have our cake and eat it too. Is that possible, for example, with the United States? No. Who is the author of trade embargoes? Who is the author of economic isolationism and everything? It is the United States. My point is, at least in a small way still, China is entertaining interactions with us in other aspects, even cultural. But I'm sorry, I have to take this line because of the question of the Rappler guy, of Mr. Mentong, whether we should be afraid of the United States. I would like to give the answer on two counts. Yes, because if we happen to be an enemy of the United States, we will not be treated the way China is treating us. Everything in its power will be thrown at us. I'm not talking about facts now. I'm talking about inclinations. We can go back to the so-called Laurel-Langley agreements. Everything was thrown at us on the trade side after we sought independence. When Mount Pinatubo erupted and destroyed Subic facilities and Clark facilities, they left hook, line, and sinker and suspended military interaction for a decade to punish the Philippines. Why is it resumed now? Because of the China factor. This is how international relations is conducted. So we should not look at international relations with rose-colored glasses. I would say China could have done something worse because of our stance against China. And if you ask me also, my position is really our direction against China is wrong, because what China is doing in the South China Sea is not against us. If China does reclamation, does militarization of the South China Sea, what does that mean? Is it to hostage the ASEAN countries? No, come on, for heaven's sake. But it is reacting precisely to geopolitical moves of the United States. This will be a long discussion, but I'd like to stop there at this time and hopefully invite questions. Thank you.
All right. There you have it. We'd like to acknowledge, kasama rin natin si Dr. Rommel Banlaoi, isang national security expert. Dr. Banlaoi, let me ask you, meron bang terorista sa Pilipinas? Sapagkat sinasabi, once terrorist may be somebody else's freedom fighter. Dr. Banlaoi, please.
Unang-una, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Happy anniversary sa
Thank
inyo.
you.
Okay. I thought I will be talking about the South China disputes and Philippines-China relations, but since Melo asked something about terrorism, yeah, of course, obviously, there are many terrorists operating in the Philippines, and there are many terrorist groups right now operating in the Philippines, but there is a strong expectation that the Duterte government will be able to craft a more effective and more nuanced approach to counter terrorist threats. When you talk about terrorism, of course, the number one in the list is the Abu Sayyaf group. But the Abu Sayyaf group is no longer a homogeneous organization. It is already a highly diverse organization that has already acquired a hybrid character that navigates the murky line of terrorism, banditry, and insurgency. So we have to address that context. And there is one faction of the Abu Sayyaf group who has already pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. And that faction is being headed by Isnilon Hapilon, who is now operating largely in Basilan, particularly in a remote village of Albarca, Basilan. In fact, Isnilon Hapilon wants to demonstrate to Islamic State that the Albarca Basilan is now their territory that should deserve the attention of ISIS, and he wants this territory to be recognized by ISIS as the wilayat or province of ISIS in the southern Philippines. But unfortunately, the problem with Isnilon Hapilon is that he cannot hold ground, because that's the major criteria of ISIS. If you want to be declared as a province or wilayat, you must hold ground, you must establish foothold, and you must be able to demonstrate that you have effective control of your territory. And Isnilon Hapilon has not yet effectively controlled that territory. If you remember, there was fighting in Albarca Basilan, and there was a Moroccan jihadist that was killed during the fighting. The main intention of that Moroccan jihadist is to train the group of Isnilon Hapilon to hold ground. And that is why the fighting lasted for almost 48 hours, because the Moroccan was demonstrating to other Abu Sayyaf group that if you are fighting with government forces, you must hold ground and defend your territory. Unfortunately, they were overpowered by military forces. And I think the Philippine military should sustain its efforts in denying this group to hold certain territory, because once they already controlled a certain territory, that will encourage ISIS to recognize the group of Isnilon Hapilon as the legitimate wilayat of ISIS in Mindanao. Second, there's also another ISIS follower operating in Lanao del Sur, and that is the Mauti group. In fact, for me, compared with Abu Sayyaf group, the Mauti group is more dangerous, because the Mauti group is really mimicking the actions of the ISIS. So aside from the Mauti group in Lanao del Sur, there's another group operating in Sarangani area, the Ansar Khalifa Philippines, formerly Ansar Khalifa Sarangani, now being headed by Commander Tokboy, a former member of the More Islamic Liberation Front Special Operation Group. And they also want to compete with Abu Sayyaf group on the recognition of recognition from ISIS. But Ansar Khalifa Philippines already sided with Isnilon Hapilon. Okay, and if you remember, there were a unified group that recognized Isnilon Hapilon as the overall Amir of ISIS. So aside from Ansar Khalifa Philippines, there's another shadowy group called Khalifa Islamiyah Mindanao, now transformed itself as Khalifa Islamiyah Movement, to demonstrate that the movement is not only limited in Mindanao but also in the entire Philippines, with the support of the various remnants of the Raha Sulaiman Islamic Movement, a Muslim rebirth. So you see, we now have a menu of several ISIS followers in the Philippines being represented by several organizations, and there are still many shadowy groups emerging. And the latest situation is the video released by ISIS itself, okay, encouraging all Muslims in the world that if you cannot go to Syria and Iraq to wage jihad, go to the Philippines to pursue jihad. You saw that video, and after that video, they beheaded three of their victims. And what is worrying me is the strong indication that there is a Filipino fighter in Syria, because one of the persons in the video was a Filipino who can speak Tagalog very, very fluently, and can speak English very, very fluently, and can speak Arabic very, very fluently. And for me, that personality is very virulent, because that personality, based on our initial profiling, has skill in using social media to propagate its ideology. And if you will look at the video released by ISIS, it's really well crafted. The production is very good, and they got a lot of footages coming from the Albarca incidents and several pledge of allegiances of several ISIS followers. So in my opinion, ISIS is really organized in promoting their virulent ideology in the Philippines. And the challenge to the Duterte government is to prevent this virulent ideology to spread further, particularly with the youth, especially the out-of-school youth in Mindanao with access to social media. Now, the battleground is no longer the territory. The cyberspace is the battleground for Islamic radicalization and promotion of violent extremism. So my suggestion is to Philippine government to also develop its skill in outsmarting these personalities and organizations in using the social media to counter their malevolent intent. Thank you.
Okay. So what you're saying is, kulang pa yung trabaho ni Test Daman. Dahilan sa yung mga kabataan ng target ng ISIS. Kulang pa yun.
Kailangan pang dagdagan because there are so many out of school youth right now in Mindanao, and this out of school youth is not only being taken advantage by terrorist groups but also by other criminal organizations interested in making money, kidnap for ransom, extortion, human trafficking, drug trafficking, name it. Okay, and you know the situation in Mindanao is so complicated because the Abu Sayyaf group is also having linkage with ordinary criminal groups. You know, in Mindanao, many armed groups operating in Mindanao, they regard each other as their respective force multipliers. So they might be small, but they appear big because they have the support of other armed groups with various motivations: money, ideology, Islamic State, power, etc., etc. Okay.
Sir, it is very interesting that you have talked about the social media and terrorism, cyber terrorism, which is the term now. What do you suggest? What are the skills that we should learn as Filipinos, especially with very, very slow internet at this?
Well, there is an approach called the de-radicalization approach being used. The radicalization approach shall not only be limited to one-on-one de-radicalization. There must be, the Philippine government must develop a de-radicalization approach that will focus on social media. Because social media is a powerful weapon for radicalization. In fact, many of the attackers worldwide are influenced by ISIS through the social media, and many incidents of attacks that happen in the world right now are carried out by lone wolf attack. Okay, they are not part of any organized group, not part of any movement, but radicalized online by just accessing online sites of ISIS. So there must be increased and intensified effort to use the social media for the radicalization and for the promotion of peace promotion. So social media.
Okay. I'd like to acknowledge friends who served as resource persons, no? Some months, some years ago. Si Mentong Laurel, si Linggoy Alcuaz, si Dr. Gabi Lopez. Commodore Rex Robles is here, of the famous RAM. Health Undersecretary Ted Herbosa is also here with us. And we'd like to acknowledge our friends from the Vietnamese, Malaysian, and Japanese embassies who took time out to be with us this morning, and my classmates way, way back. Okay, so we'll open the floor to questions from our friends from the media. Tracy, where are you? Oh, Tracy. Okay, let's start with Recto Mercene here. Recto.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Recto Mercene from Business Mirror. Allow me to address this question to former Ambassador Ancomienda. Sir, if I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the sub judice rule applies only to the lawyers of both sides, not to the media. And my question is this, no? It seems that many of us, and that includes me, were surprised by the sudden turn of events, whereas President Aquino was palaban in the way he addressed our problem in the South China Sea, suddenly we became so acquiescent of the situation. If you hear the Chinese side, they will say, we are willing to go to war. Laging very strong kanilang statement. Suddenly, here we are, a small nation, and seeming trying to appease them. Naging masyado tayo mapagpakumbaba. Whereas, if we know that we are right and that we really stand for our sovereignty, then we should issue a stronger statement. Like, the only one I remember having issued a strong statement was former DND Secretary Gasmin when he said, mamamatay kami to the last man. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, firstly, sub judice, it does not only apply to lawyers, but I agree with you, it does not apply to media either. You see, media is only a medium. The ones talking about this, the events in the South China Sea, is not the media. The media starts reporting what, for example, CSIS is saying, or what the American embassy is saying, and these things. This is precisely the point, or for that matter, Justice Carpio, who is a senior justice. So, media, I agree, is not covered by sub judice simply because it is only reporting what others are saying who should not be saying it. Okay. Now, in regard to your main question, I would really confess there's a bit of difficulty discussing this because you are saying that China is rather aggressive. I would like to say, as a premise for myself, that I'm a student of international relations, a student of international law. I was with the Department of Foreign Affairs for 40 years, and the last 10 years of those 40 years was involved in the China issue. Now, talking about international relations, this is what I've been saying. In fact, I'm working on a monograph which is about the South China Sea, but not the South China Sea issues. It is about Philippines' foreign policy as it is. Thank you. As it is played out in the South China Sea. Now, I have always, okay, let me start, for example, with freedom of navigation. It is not, if I may say so directly, Tapatan, it is not an operative fact on the ground. The best proof that freedom of navigation has never been disturbed, we always say, if you disturb freedom of navigation, there are 50 trillion tons of trade going in the South China Sea. Has those 50 trillion tons of trade been disrupted the last 4 years or the last 6 years of the Aquino administration? Never. Let's ratchet it up a
Closer
bit.
to the microphone, sir. Yeah.
Let us ratchet up a bit. When the United States undertook their freedom of navigation operations within 12 nautical miles of the Chinese installations, was it ever challenged by China? No. But in fact, of course, it did freedom of navigation operations, but doing it in that way, 12 nautical miles from a Chinese installation, which is controversial, that's very provocative. Now, let me again repeat, I'm not talking this way because I'm pro-China or against the U.S. If I have to declare which side I am on, I assure you I'm with the Philippines. I'm a Filipino. And to follow President Duterte, I love the Philippines. Now, but it is a fact, if I may say so again, extrapolating on what I said, the United States has its own agenda about world hegemony. It is in this book. It was no less than Hillary Clinton who said it, that the U.S. wants to maintain the status quo in the world, its status quo in the world through a rules-based, shall we say, modality. Except
But is there anything wrong with that? Would it stand?
No, nothing. Except that, okay, there are 2 points there. I want to say that question about China. China is simply, if whatever it is doing in the South China Sea, is simply only trying to reestablish its natural sphere of influence that it has enjoyed for more than 2,000 years. So just as the U.S. having aspirations to world hegemony, there's nothing wrong with China's aspirations. Now, the thing is, in the present situation, the U.S. cannot accept that China will exercise hegemony in the South China Sea. Let me put it this way. You look at the Mutual Defense Treaty. The Mutual Defense Treaty is very clear. It's applicable only, number one, to an armed attack against U.S. and the Philippines, yes. But number two, in the Pacific area. In World War II, the Pacific theater was very clear what it is and where it is. What is the definition of the United States now of the Pacific? It includes the South China Sea and Indo-Pacific. So, again, I said this in another forum, and it went viral all against me. All I said was, the United States, following your line, is doing everything right for itself, pursuing its national interests. China is doing everything right for itself, pursuing its own national interests. Now, the problem really is, if I may say so, the Philippines is caught in the middle, and I'm not sure whether we are in the right track siding with the United States. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Rommel, would you care to add?
When it comes to the South China Sea disputes, China is facing four major types of disputes. 5 disputes with claimant bilaterally: China, Philippines, China, Vietnam, China, Brunei, China, Malaysia. Okay, and to a certain extent, China-Taiwan. So that's bilateral. So at the same time, South China Sea dispute is also regional. China versus the region, so ASEAN, particularly the ASEAN claimants. Third type of dispute is China versus non-claimants, like for example, Japan and even Indonesia, and China versus the United States. So South China Sea disputes have many aspects. And right now, what we are seeing is the disputes happening between China and the United States. Because South China Sea dispute is also a major fulcrum of major power rivalry between China and the United States, especially in this sensitive period of what we call period of power transition. Why? Because China is rising tremendously as a global power, and the United States, as an established power right now, is declining very rapidly. I was in Washington, D.C. 2 months ago, and we made an assessment of U.S. power, and we made the conclusion that the United States will still be the major superpower in the foreseeable future. Now we define what is the foreseeable future. The foreseeable future is 15 years. So after 15 years, there will be another power rising. So we're now in a period of power transition. And China in that power transition is very, very serious in projecting its power in the South China Sea. And for the United States, that kind of projection is threatening to unestablished power. Because that area used to be an American lake. Now China is converting the area as a China lake. And for the United States, an established power, that is not acceptable. And when it comes to the freedom of navigation, China and the United States have different interpretations of freedom of navigation. For China, freedom of navigation is only limited to economic activities. But when it comes to military activities, particularly in the exclusive economic zone, then military activities should be limited. Okay. So, but the United States considered the South China Sea as part of international waters, where freedom of navigation should be enjoyed not only for economic purpose, but also for military purposes. But when it comes to the military aspect of freedom of navigation, China is very wary of American role. And China said that, okay, you can freely navigate in that area for military vessels if only it is for innocent passage. But if that military vessels are conducting surveillance and intelligence gathering activities and other military operations called freedom of navigation operation, for China, that is not acceptable. So we see now that the South China Sea is not only an issue between China and claimants, but an issue between two competing major powers. And this is my fear, that the South China Sea might provide what we call in the academic community the proverbial Thucydides trap that might ignite future conflict between China and the United States. And that is why there is tremendous efforts on the part of China and the United States to promote military dialogue in order to prevent unintended military encounter in the South China Sea. Because any minor incident can trigger a major war that both two powers do not want to occur.
Okay. Next question, please.
Good morning, sirs, ma'am. JC Gotinga po from CNN Philippines. To Ambassador Ancomienda, sir, you said na it might not be a good thing that we're taking the US's side. Sabi niyo po. But the reality is, the Philippines does not have we don't have our own military muscle to assert our claims, which is the rationale na binibigay ng the previous administration why we went for arbitration in the first place. Of course, we cannot expect China to just drop its own claims. China is claiming practically the entire South China Sea for itself, which is detrimental to the Philippines' economic interests. So if we are not going to side with the US, and if we cannot expect China to drop the claim, saan po lulugar yung Pilipinas? Ano po yung if you were to chart the path for the Philippines, kung kayo po yung masusunod, alin po ba yung tatahaking landas ng Pilipinas to protect its maritime entitlements?
Thank you very much for that question. Because we may have to draw back farther. No. Right now, all we are seeing are shows of force by China and the United States. But in regard to China and the Philippines, before China became even more aggressive, there was always that window to negotiate. And negotiating and seeking consensus and is the Asian way. Now, if I may say so, the problem with our situation is we see some activity there on the Chinese side, and we feel that it might not be, favorable to us. So what do? This is how we handled it. We invoked the Mutual Defense Treaty. Which is not even, no, the problem in fact with the Mutual Defense Treaty, of course, since you were not born yet, but this was part of my life in the DFA, I was a gopher entry level when these things happened. So, in fact, I mentioned it in this monograph without citation, simply because a lot of this, the things I said here, never found its way to the newspapers. I was the special assistant of Secretary Carlos Rommel, so I was in the picture of how these things were moving. When many countries were moving to recognize China, we also had to be ready for that. But before we did, we consulted the United States. Look, if we recognize People's Republic of China government, and something happens in this list, will you defend us? U.S. said no, simply because the we tried to mention the Mutual Defense Treaty, but the United States said no, because that is not part of your metropolitan territory. So way back then, the U.S. never wanted. But now, who is pushing for the Mutual Defense Treaty? It's the United States. Now, this is where we go back to what we said earlier. U.S. is pushing for Mutual Defense Treaty that has now been enriched with VFA, EDCA, the Mutual Defense Board, etc. Why? Is it to defend the Philippines? No. This is why I said we should have caution in this regard. Yes. Because for a weak country, yes, the first recourse should be negotiations.
Of course, sir,
and
yes,
for Asia, using Asian values, it is to seek consensus.
Yes, sir. So two things. Number one, sir, are you saying that pursuing arbitration was not the right thing to do?
Two things. What's the second one?
The second one is, nakalimutan ko pa, sir. Yung una na lang muna.
Good.
I lost it, sorry.
There's nothing funny to me there. I just wanted to know,
yes,
if I could get the second question also, so we could probably merge.
Sige, sir. Okay, yung doon na lang muna tayo, sir. So you say the arbitration was not the right track to take. Ayan, yung pangalawa, sir. Ang sinasabi ng DFA, at least middle to late of last year, is that negotiations with China hit a dead end.
This is what I referred to earlier. Sabi ng DFA, including Del Rosario himself, traveling 151 times during his term, that they have exhausted all diplomatic means. I really hope I could distribute this monograph,
okay,
because
sige,
I said it in a lot of detail, you know. First, let's go to your first question. Do I think it's the correct way? I said no. I was still active in the DFA when these things were already also active, you know, these issues. But there was no big issue about, you know, Mutual Defense Treaty. We were just really trying to manage especially the tensions. So we had confidence building measures. We had marine scientific research, and we went into JMSU, which was aborted. So we were taking that track.
All right.
And but then arbitration for us, if I may go direct to that question, for us when I was there, was a no-no. Why? Because arbitration Okay, third-party settlement is of course established, but this specific arbitration under UNCLOS is not tested and fully accepted. It is in the law, and we follow that.
Sige po, sir. Sorry to cut you. Cut to the chase na lang po. So, paano mapanghahawakan ng Pilipinas yung karapatan niya dun sa dagat in question? Kasi punot dulo yun lang naman yun eh. Sa Amerika, mukhang hindi natin makukuha from them. Sa China, lalong hindi natin makukuha from them. So, how?
I'm sorry, I go back to what I said. You just have to talk to China. Because before this arbitration...
Sige sir, what do we tell China to convince them to let us fish in those waters, to let us mine those resources?
Those fishing issues came much later.
Kasi sir, nandyan na yung arbitration. Sorry sir, forward looking. The arbitration is already there.
Yes.
So looking forward, we can't go back anymore.
Yes.
We should have.
Yeah,
We
but
can't
your
do that
question,
anymore.
if I might is cut
Yes
up
po.
in there.
Kaya
Your
yung next
question
po,
was
this
whether
next one.
We were in the right track. So let me
Okay.
answer that
So,
first.
okay.
I don't feel we are. Now, if you want to go ahead
Okay.
and look at the arbitrationers, is it now? Okay, ask your
Yes
question.
sir. O yun sir, ngayon po, how do we proceed? Andyan na yung arbitration.
Oh, it was clear from what was said earlier. We wait for the results.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Banlaoi, you have anything to say? Yes, please.
This is
Next
the role of
question.
an academic, to put the matter into a proper perspective. The question is, why we pursued the arbitration in the first place? Okay. We lost patience in talking to China. 1995, China occupied Mischief Reef. A year prior to that, 1994, China and ASEAN agreed that if we have differences on the South China Sea, we will resort to direct negotiation. And we pursued. 1995, China occupied Mischief Reef. We threatened China of arbitration. But since we abide by the 1994 China-ASEAN statement that we will pursue direct negotiation, we pursued direct negotiation with China for 17 years, 1994 to 2012. But during the 2012, there was, I don't know if I'm free to reveal what happened during those times, but I think magtapatan na tayo, no? There was an agreement between China and the Philippines, facilitated by another major power, for the two countries to pursue mutual withdrawal. Why? On the part of the Philippines, we really need to withdraw because, our logistical capability cannot sustain long law enforcement operation in the area. But China can sustain even months of operation in the area. We withdrew, but China stayed and even remained there. And that was the tipping point. We convened the National Security Council, well, not National Security Council, but the National Security Cluster, and consulted many former government officials, including former presidents, and they agreed, okay, we need to pursue arbitration. Then there was a question, do we need to tell our neighbors in ASEAN to do this? Do we need to tell China? No. This is our sovereign prerogative to do this. So we pursued arbitration. In other words, we were compelled by China's actions to pursue international arbitration. Now international arbitration is there, and the ruling will be issued on July 12. What is the way forward? What's the way forward? First, the South China Sea dispute is not only a legal issue. The South China Sea dispute is a highly geopolitical issue. The Philippines is not the only country involved. There are many countries involved. So we have to understand its geopolitical aspect. The legal aspect is just one. Unfortunately, China is ignoring the legal aspect. Why? Because for China, the South China dispute is not a legal issue. The South China Sea dispute is a political issue that requires negotiated political solution. Parang issue natin yan with the NPA and with the armed groups in Mindanao. It's an inherently political issue. And China said that, hey, if you recognize that issue as a political issue, then we can talk. But the problem is now, okay, under Duterte, we're willing to talk. But China should show some gesture and not use its military muscle as a leverage. Because if China will use its military muscle as a leverage for negotiation, we can also use the result of the arbitration as our leverage. And I think the Duterte government does not want to come to that point. Start talking without any use of any leverage. So I think talking will start from building confidence because, 6 years, you destroyed so much of this confidence that were built through years of bilateral relationship. Now, the first step in a 1,000-mile journey, rebuild confidence.
Okay.
Once you rebuild confidence, point comfort level where both countries can cooperate.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yes, Madam, please introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Marian and I am the Philippine correspondent for Radio France International. So my question is for Sir Banlaoi. I'm happy to talk to you at last because I was the one who contacted you for the my story on Shabu and Abu Sayyaf. Yeah, but it's not about that. My question is still about Abu Sayyaf because the new president said he would be ready to discuss with Abu Sayyaf. So I would like to know what you think about this. Do you think it's dangerous? Is it like really pragmatic? What do you think?
Again, put that in proper context. When you say talking with the Abu Sayyaf group, it's not the same talking that we're doing with the communist movement or talking with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front or the Moro National Liberation Front. It's not a formal talk. It is an informal talk. In my years of studying Abu Sayyaf group, I was able to profile several commanders. And there are commanders of the Abu Sayyaf group that I consider mediatable, meaning you can talk to them. But there are also commanders who cannot talk to them because they're interested in money. And there's also another group of commanders who are interested really in Islamic State. So I think the Philippine government under Duterte will pursue informal talks with ASG commanders in order to encourage others to join. And this is my prognosis. Okay? I think the Moro National Liberation Front will play a major crucial role in this informal talk. Because if the MNLF will assist the Philippine government in talking with these people, I think there is a great chance of success. So for those non-mediatable personalities, non-negotiable personalities, I think it requires strong law enforcement measure.
Okay, but do you think this strategy could encourage Abu Sayyaf to maybe take more people into hostages? What do you think about that?
Again, this is my fear because right now the Abu Sayyaf group only have two major foreign hostages, the Dutch and the Norwegian, and that makes the Abu Sayyaf group more vulnerable for military operation and law enforcement operation. And this is my fear that Abu Sayyaf group might mount kidnap for operations again. Why? Because they use foreign nationals as their effective shield against law enforcement. So that's my fear. That situation shall be prevented.
Okay, and about the fact that Duterte is the first president from Mindanao, do you think that he's one who can have the best position to negotiate with all this armed group in Mindanao?
Okay, can you?
Duterte is the first president from Mindanao, right? So do you think that he has the best position to negotiate with all these armed groups in Mindanao?
I think there is high optimism on the part of the Duterte government to deliver on that aspect. So we should give him our benefit of the doubt. So for me, I'm giving him my guarded optimism to perform and make a difference on countering these groups.
Yes. Next question.
Good morning, sir. I'm Nina Ibarola from The Jungle Post. It's an online youth-oriented news magazine. I would like to direct my question to you, Dr. Banlaoi. I would like to ask, with regards to the situation in Mindanao right now, the dire situation there, do you think martial law is the best option for the government to take back control? Or if not, are you considering it? Are you open to the idea of it if ever the situation worsens? And do you have any other alternatives along with strengthening the social media presence of the government?
I seldom say this in public, but I am a martial law baby. I grew up during martial law. I was born in 1970, 1972, martial law was declared. And when I was growing up, I only see good things about martial law. Okay? I only saw bad things about martial law when I started studying in UP, when I took my BA in political science, and so that changed in mind. So I agree. in order to crush major groups, because very complicated in the area, you have to empower the state to use its coercive apparatus to address these armed groups. So I agree with the implementation of martial law on a limited basis, like the way we implemented martial law after the Maguindanao massacre. Only on a limited basis and must follow the due process. It must be approved by the Congress. Okay, so that's it. But not a unilateral declaration by the President. So it must go through our constitutional process. It must be approved by the Congress.
To Ambassador Ancomienda, according to your speech, welcoming speech earlier, or your speech, if I may I clarify that your premise was that the Aquino administration made a mistake in pursuing the arbitration. Am I correct to say that?
Yes, as a matter of personal view. But if we look at that subject now, I make that point because things were moving. Actually, I'm sorry, I have to disagree with my partner to the right that, we have been negotiating with China since the 1990s. We were not. I want to make the point that I handled the office in the Department of Foreign Affairs, directly in charge of the Spratly situation, and up to the time I retired in 2009, there were no direct negotiations in the matter of resolving this Spratly's question peacefully. No. So that's all I wanted to say. But I want to focus to your question now. If you may define it again.
Sorry, I just wanted to know, make a clarificatory question about that. But moving forward, so you weren't there in 2012 when the Scarborough Shoal was actually being...
no, I was no longer there. Anyway.
Okay, so that being said...
No. I want to hear your question, actually. But at the outset, I was no longer there.
Right.
But I want to hear your question, if you may proceed.
I've forgotten about it.
Okay.
Anyways, I'm sorry? Oh, in 2012. So I think that's the reason they pursued the arbitration, because it's a different case. So going back, right now, since we're all waiting for the decision to be awarded by the Hague or the tribunal, the only statement, if I'm right, the only statement that the Philippines is giving right now is that we'll have to wait until the decision comes. Whereas I think China has been also sending out press releases on broadsheets and also on television, and even another organization, an NGO, disputing or discrediting the UNCLOS or whatever decision that the Hague will deliver. Now, would you say that China is already posturing, or are they discrediting just so that people will not abide with the law? Because apparently they will not abide with whatever the Hague will release. And since that's why perhaps the international law is also saying that they will help the Philippines in patrolling the area. So can you give me your ideas, and also with Professor Banlaoi also?
Okay, from where you started from, okay, let me collect my thoughts. In regard to China, okay, you began by saying that right now we're not making any pronouncements. That's true, and I emphasize that this happened only with the statement of President Duterte. In fact, after he took his oath.
Right.
Now, the next few days, from what I gathered from you, what you heard was a lot of noises from China. But I would disagree with that, because I would say, in fact, that China has been reacting only in the public domain. In regard, there's no connection in the first place. For example, the loud noises. If this is how I heard it, I don't know how you heard it. The loud noises for that the Philippines has international support, and I say U.S., Japan, Europe, and everything, and already loudly sending signals that China will be isolated. So China came back with a listing of its own about countries who are supporting them. But the U.S. countered by saying that, but those are insignificant countries, I'm sorry to say, but when you talk about UNCLOS, no country in the world is insignificant. For example, Switzerland. Where is Switzerland? At the top of the Alps. But it is a signatory to the UNCLOS. It is not a member of the UN, mind you, because it wants to maintain its neutrality. But it is signatory to the UNCLOS, which the United States is not, by the way. Now, the point here is, don't say that a country is small, it is insignificant as far as UNCLOS is concerned, because under UNCLOS, even landlocked states have rights to the sea. Laos, for example, Mongolia. I mentioned Switzerland, which has a big marine shipping business, you know. Now, I mentioned this, in fact, because I want to mention something else. We have been talking about UNCLOS as practically the only thing that can resolve everything in the South China Sea. Just as Mentong reversed the question about whether we should be afraid of China or the United States, I would also like to say in a reverse way, what if China denounces UNCLOS? It is allowed under the convention for a country to denounce UNCLOS. If China is not happy with the arbitration and denounces UNCLOS, right away, two big countries in the world, maritime countries, China and the United States, will be outside of UNCLOS. Fine, but will it stop there? UNCLOS has a very weak foundation, very precarious foundation. Why? Simply because nobody's happy with it. But it is a package deal in order to get something done, you know. In fact, when the UNCLOS process was going on, of course, we have the big maritime countries who could make their interests known, but there have also been an interest groups of states to push their own. It is a balancing thing, and the balancing is very precarious. In fact, when it comes to Part 4, that is the archipelagic state, there is mention there of constructive ambiguity. What happened in the conference was, let's accept this part for what it is, ambiguous or not, just so we could have an agreement. That was then the mantra in a lot of issues in the Love the Sea Convention, constructive ambiguity. Now, if China denounces the convention, that might start a contagion. I tell you something, Philippines was never happy with the UNCLOS, okay? So, if I can have my inputs, I can say a lot of things why. If UNCLOS has to break up, let it break up. We will go along with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And Professor, very brief statement, just very short one.
I stand corrected of the issue of direct negotiation. If I use that term, it was not the proper term, but the bilateral discussions or dialogues on the South China Sea. But after the arbitration, we cut this dialogue mechanism to talk about the issue of the South China Sea. And indeed, there was no official negotiation on the South China Sea issue. Okay, China's actions or reactions are after arbitration. This is my fear. Okay. I was just in Beijing 2 weeks ago, and I told some of my friends there, particularly some officials, I urged them not to overreact, because China has been overreacting. Like, for example, building artificial islands, 7 artificial islands in the South China Sea because of arbitration and because of EDCA. That's an overreaction. And that overreaction is, in fact, creating eyebrows, raising eyebrows, not only in the region but also in the world. So I am urging China to act calmly on the issue and assure its goodwill with the Duterte government, because I think the Duterte government is serious in talking with China, serious in repairing damaged political ties with China because of lessons learned in the region. Singapore is embracing China economically, but embracing the United States in security matter. Thailand. Thailand is a formal treaty ally of the United States like the Philippines. But Thailand right now is enjoying its own tactical moment with China, but at the same time getting from the United States as an ally. Brunei, Malaysia, these are claimants in the South China Sea, but they don't want to make the South China Sea as an issue that will hamper their strong economic ties. And even Vietnam, for God's sake. Do I have friends from Vietnam?
Yeah, we have a friend from Vietnam.
Vietnam is economically dependent on China. And that is why it has limited maneuver compared to the Philippines. And this is the good thing about the Philippine government. Our economy is not dependent on China, and we shall remain that kind of status. Our economy is dependent on overseas Filipino contract workers. Okay? So because of that economic resilience, we can do the arbitration. And China knows our leverage on that.
Yes. When you say we urge China to react humbly, you're not really pertaining to military reaction or
For
war.
example, the fear. This is not the fear among academic communities in the region. Okay? The fear is that China might build facilities in Scarborough Shoal.
That's right.
Okay? Or China might declare air defense identification zone in the South China Sea. If China does that, I think it will create another reactions, not only from the Philippines, but also from the United States. And hear the words of the United States. I attended the Shangri-La Dialogue last month, and Secretary Ashton Carter told China, don't build a seawall of isolation, because your actions in the South China Sea are building seawall of isolation, and be part of what he said, a principled security network in the region. But Admiral Sun reacted strongly. And what was the reaction of Admiral Sun? China avoids trouble, but fear no trouble. And for me, that is a very strong statement from China. And China, for me, should avoid those statements. Why? Because it's exacerbating the security anxieties already being felt by smaller neighbors. So China is a big power. You're big enough. If you whisper, it's already loud. Okay? If China whispers, it's already loud because of its bigness. I think China should be reminded of Deng Xiaoping principle. Hide your intention. Keep a low profile. Be friendly with your neighbors. And China should be reminded that Deng Xiaoping's formula was effective in winning the heart and minds of their neighbors. Thank you.
All right. Ellen and, of course, Maynard. Oh yeah, short reaction from the good ambassador.
Just on 2 points. Number one, those gratuitous advice to China about not building a seawall of isolation, and another thing also from CSIS saying that, if China does not follow arbitration, it will become an outlaw. Now, my point is, I hope the United States can consider China mature enough to look at its own vital interests and pursue it in the way it wants to. No gratuitous advice. Number two, outlaw. Who is the number one outlaw? It's the United States. It's outside of the UNCLOS. Thank you.
All right. Ellen, make it short and Maynard.
I just may 3 questions para isang
Sige nga, sige nga.
Number one is that the reclamations made by China in the Sprat list was in 2013 after we filed the arbitration case. So looking back, would that have happened if we did not file the arbitration case? Would China have reclaimed, or was it just a reaction to the filing of the arbitration? Because that could be a lesson on how we react, right? Another thing is that the Duterte administration wants to talk with China, and the goodwill that we expect between the Duterte government and China, could it result into the withdrawal of China from Scarborough Shoal? Then another one is that it's common sense that before you talk loud, you should at least have naman some credible, strong defense, di ba? Ganon. And which we do not have. So, what kind of, everybody says that we have to strengthen militarily. And we know that strengthening militarily takes decades, right? But in the short term, what, this is Professor Banlaoi, what kind of short-term, what you call that, strengthening of the military should we have to have at least a credible defense? Credible defense naman if we talk strong, if we use strong statements, parang okay, both.
On your first question, as a scholar studying this matter for many years, China already had intention to strengthen their foothold in the region. Just imagine the seven reef where China built artificial islands. It cannot be done overnight. It must be a product of many years of planning, many years of assessment, and many years on where to get the raw materials and where to get all these things and what technology they should. It's a product. Maybe it's before 2012. Maybe in 1992 when they declared the area as part of its territorial waters and contiguous zone, China already planned those things. But China was looking for a proper pretext and timing to pursue its plan. I think our arbitration case provided China a strong justification to implement its plan. For example, in Scarborough Shoal, China also wants not only to strengthen, not only to maintain its presence in Scarborough Shoal, but to strengthen its effective control of Scarborough Shoal. China will not withdraw. China will not withdraw in the Scarborough Shoal. Why? Because it has domestic implications. China's actions in the South China Sea have social acceptability of the Chinese people. They love what China is doing because they consider those areas as part of their territory based on historical facts, part of their traditional fishing ground. Kindergarten in China are being told of their territories, and that territories includes the Nanshan Island or the South China Sea. So if China withdraws from the Scarborough Shoal, it will have strong domestic political backlash. So China will not do that. Now, what's options left for the Philippines? We don't have any military might to pursue our claim. You know, your lack in military power, okay, you should harness our skill in diplomacy. Okay? I think that's the only way. We have, when China was weak, China just they keep its low profile, talking to everybody. So we should also learn lessons from China. We are weak now. And this is my observation on why we remain to be weak militarily. Because we remain dependent too much on our security alliance with the United States. We have to build our autonomous defense. Many countries are building their capability for autonomous defense, and we have not explored that option. Why? Because we have this thinking mentality that Uncle Sam is always behind us, that we can always free ride on the security umbrella provided by the United States. I think we have to strengthen our economic fundamentals and build our capability autonomously. The 1995 AFP modernization program would have been that opportunity. But of course, our domestic politics prevented that. Why? This is if you have read my work about AFP modernization and why AFP modernization program did not push through, because it has something to do also with the outlook of our lawmakers. Our lawmakers, they do not have appreciation of external defense at that time. These were landlords. They were threatened by the NPA. So any modernization should be given to the Philippine Army to crush insurgency, not to the Philippine Navy, not to the Philippine Air Force. But now we are facing a reality of external challenges emanating from the South China Sea disputes. I think that should provide us a tipping point to really start allocating more money for autonomous defense. Well, we're happy that Japan is there to give us 10 patrol vessels for the Coast Guard, and I think additional 2 patrol vessels, 80 meters. We're so happy that the United States is giving us second-hand Hamilton-class cutter. Tatlo na ba na-deliver? Already, dalawa pa lang, and the third one is going to be delivered very soon, right?
The third one is scientific research.
Oh, scientific, okay. But those will not create a dent in our capability building. Okay? If you want to build your capability, I shall not rely on Melo, I shall not rely on Ambassador Encomienda, I should rely on my own strength and resources. Why? Because if I rely on Melo, rely on Encomienda, I will be beholden by them, and my flexibility as a player will be limited by their influence.
Okay.
Sir.
Maynard.
What about, she wants my view?
Without arbitration, they will do it.
Well, okay. I would highlight first on the reclamation, no? Because I always pointed out, I have been always pointing out that if we talk about reclamation, destruction of reefs and everything, who did it first? The Philippines. We built that airfield in Pag-asa on a bed of corals. That's why, and again, I lived the times, that's why I can say this, that's why it was a very expensive proposition for the Philippines, poor as we are, to even maintain the runway. Because the runway was built on live corals that continues to grow somehow and has to be paved and repaved. At certain times, that runway, that runway was built to accommodate C-130s. But at certain times, it could not, I think even up to now, it could no longer accommodate C-130s. So, but if you look at Pag-asa, we reclaimed only both ends. China has reclaimed 7 reefs, and you know the situation there. But the point still is, if you talk about reclamation, let's make an analogy of, say, thievery. You steal 100 pesos, that's bad, simply because I stole only 10 centavos. The principle is the same. Now, but why is again China trying to build that thing? If I go back to what I said, I don't believe that China is built those facilities and possibly militarize it in order to host states, their ASEAN neighbors, for heaven's sake. We go back to what Professor Banlaoi said as geopolitics. The agenda of the United States for itself in the world and the agenda of China for itself in the region. And that is what is playing out in the Spratlys Archipelago. There was a question about fisheries, especially in the Scarborough Shoal. When you talk about soft approaches, during my time, we were talking precisely about rules-based UNCLOS, which is about Part 9 and sharing of resources. That has never been discussed with China. So what can you expect of China? It's a positioning thing. But let me say this point also about our part. Who are complaining about not being able to fish in the Scarborough Shoal? It is artisanal fishermen from Pangasinan and Zambales. But the point is, Scarborough Shoal is 70 nautical miles from Zambales and Pangasinan. Artisanal fisheries should not go beyond 6 or 7 nautical miles from the shore. But why are they fishing there? Simply because, again, internally we never took care of our resources. The fishermen our own fishermen have destroyed our coastal resources. That's why they have to fish there. Now, talking about another soft way to manage this question.
Yeah, I guess we have to stop. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines, Lenie Robredo. Before we listen to the keynote address of Her Excellency, we just want to give way to our good friend and colleague, Maynard Bacraig of Agence France Presse. Yes, please.
Mr. Banlaoi, on the Abu Sayyaf, it's always been the claim of the military that the Abu Sayyaf and all these other groups have no direct links to ISIS. They're just posturing with these flags. But you're saying that there is now a direct link?
I have a reason to believe so based on the information and evidences that I have gathered as a scholar looking seriously into this matter. And the mere fact that ISIS has already recognized Isnilon Hapilon as the overall Amir of followers in Mindanao is a clear indication of a link. And at the same time, all the videos being released by ISIS in many of its social media outlets acknowledging the activities of Isnilon Hapilon and its followers in Mindanao are all crystal clear indications that links are there. So I think it's for the Philippine military to explain why they are denying this so-called link. It reminds me of the situation in the early 1990s when the Philippine government and the Philippine military continued to deny the presence of Al-Qaeda in Mindanao and the link of Abu Sayyaf group with Al-Qaeda until the 2000 Rizal Day bombing occurred. We shall not avoid a bombing to occur to recognize the presence of ISIS. There are ISIS followers in the Philippines, and these ISIS followers are not only inspired by the ideology of ISIS, but also inspired by the violent activities of ISIS. Based on the publicly released video of ISIS, I can discern that communications are there.
Okay. Thank you very much, my good friend. Now, Professor Banlaoi, one last point. Do you see a scenario similar, God forbid, to Bangladesh, Cairo, and even Istanbul airport?
The Philippines is not immune from the incident that occurred in other parts of the world. What happened in Bangladesh, what happened in Jakarta, what happened in Belgium can also happen in the Philippines. If it can happen in Belgium with tight security measures, with very good information and intelligence gathering on terrorist threats, okay, then it can also happen in the Philippines. Terrorists are smart. The challenge for the Philippine government, especially under Duterte, is to outsmart them. Thank you.
Thank you. May I request Monsignor Pedro Quitorio of Areopagus to please join us at the table. May I also request Mrs. Priscilla Reyes Pacheco of the Aristocrat to please join us. So we're joined by Mrs. Priscilla Reyes Pacheco of the Aristocrat. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce Her Excellency Vice-President Lenie Herona Robredo for her remarks.
Vice-President? No, I'm from the Aristocrat.
Thank you very much. Warmest greetings to everyone in the room. First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Melo Acuña, my kababayan, for the invitation. My greetings also go to former Ambassador Alberto Ancomienda, Dr. Rommel Banlaoi. Sa inyo pong lahat, magandang umaga pong muli. Muntik na po ako hindi makarating dito ngayon dahil maraming nag-oath taking sa akin ngayon at maraming nagko-courtesy call. But Melo promised that I can stay for a shorter time than expected. So pagpaumanhin nyo na po kung pagkatapos po ng aking keynote speech, magpapaalam din po muli ako dahil marami po ako ngayong iniwan sa opisina ng mga local officials na mag-oath taking. Payagan nyo din po akong basahin yung aking speech. Binigyan lang po akong 5 to 10 minutes pero ang daming topic yung pinapadiscuss sa akin. Kaya sabi ko, mukhang pag mag-e-extend po ako, hindi ko yata matatapos ng 10 minutes. The Philippines is on the brink of something really great and we all know that now. You can see that in our economic numbers from the consistent strong gross domestic product growth rate for the last 10 years to the stable prices of our basic needs and the upgrades to investment rating international credit rating agencies have been giving us. The world started to recognize us as a country that is finally shedding the image of the sick man of Asia and now claiming its tiger cub status. Finally, what we have always hoped for is almost within our grasp. Now, moving the nation to progress is something that we need to look at with fresh eyes. There are problems that we cannot seem to shake off. Poverty levels, job growth, and inclusivity are the biggest ones that we need to fix. As in, fix right away. Not tomorrow, not towards the end of 6 years, but now. Because these problems represent real suffering of real people on the ground. What is the use of having a higher gross domestic national income when majority of our people are not able to access that income? Remember the whole point of public service. We need to live so that those who have less will have more. Moving forward will require a commitment to keep our macroeconomic numbers healthy, as well as attack the issues of poverty and inclusivity at the same time. We cannot just wait for growth to trickle down to the poor. This has been done elsewhere in the world, and we can do it also. The best path, at least for my office now, is to work with the private sector. Create collaborations and partnerships and synergies that will maximize both the resources of government and of the private sector. We have already chosen the areas of hunger and food security, universal health care, rural development, education, and people empowerment as our main priorities. And we are inviting all groups and individuals who have a passion in these areas to come to our office and partner with us. Our doors are open. We need to discuss the best ways to tackle our trenchant problems. Collaboration is our best resource right now. 6 years is a long time. We know that we can accomplish a lot within this period, but we have to move really fast. We need to fix systems, unlock barriers, and bring the discussion to the beneficiaries themselves and get their views. In my experience in alternative lawyering, it is when people are given a seat at the table and voice when solutions really work. This approach may take much longer, but it works. When the society itself is involved, there is real ownership of the solutions and there is dignity in helping. There are other pressing problems. You wanted to know about my views on corruption, overseas employment, contractualization, land reform, and foreign affairs. Masyado yatang mahaba yun, Melo, for 5 to 10 minutes. But let me attempt to discuss them very briefly one by one. Since my term in Congress started in 2013, I have advocated for the strengthening of measures that ensure accountability of public officials and also transparency and people empowerment. I have been an advocate of the Freedom of Information Bill since 2013, and I see that an informed citizenry will be the force that will prevent graft and corruption in government. In terms of employment overseas and contractualization, we must ensure that the Philippines has enough jobs, which will make working abroad a choice, not a necessity. A legislative measure is needed in order to end ENDO and outlaw this practice. It is also necessary to saturate the market with jobs so that employers will compete for labor and not the other way around. I am an advocate of the comprehensive land reform. Even if the Carper law ended already, there is still much to be done. We need to extend the issuances of notices of coverage in order to ensure that our farmers get the land they rightly deserve and be the beneficiaries of support services. In addition, as a legislator, I filed a bill creating an Agrarian Reform Commission aimed at reviewing the implementation of Carper. This will ensure that any circumventions and wrongful implementation of Carper is corrected. On foreign affairs, we must continue to pursue our claim on Kalayaan Islands in the UN Tribunal. This is the peaceful way of resolving the dispute between the Philippines and China. To make the long story short, there is much work to be done, but much to be gained in giving everything we have to this business of building our nation. As I said, we are in the cusp of something big, and this is not the time to let go. There are things that may seem impossible, but when we all work together, that is when the impossible becomes possible. Hindi ko po alam kung napakinggan nyo yung aking inaugural speech. 10 minutes din yun din yung limit. Pero that was exactly the essence of the speech. That we are, despite the viciousness of the elections that just passed, ito na yung panahon to bring everyone together and rally behind the new administration. Hindi po tayo makaka-afford na mag-away-away. Masyadong marami tayong kailangang gawin. Masyado pong maraming kailangang gawin. Maraming kahirapan, pero yung mga kahirapan hindi pwedeng gawin natin na hadlang. But rather, we have to make the constraints and the limitations challenges, and we have to go past all of this. Kasi yung 6 na taon, mahaba yun, pero sa dami ng gagawin natin, maiksi lamang yun. Kung mag-occupy pa yung mga away sa ating panahon, kawawa naman po yung ating bansa. Kaya ako po bilang pangalawang Pangulo, I believe that the number one responsibility now is to help rally everyone behind the new administration. This administration deserves our support. Hindi naman po ito para kay Pangulong Duterte lamang, pero para po ito sa sambayan ng Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much. Maraming salamat. Just mabalos tabi. We just have to present our token to Her Excellency. We request Her Excellency to please rise to receive the plaque. Monsignor, please join me.
Yes, you get
Let me read the citation. Areopagus Communications extends this plaque of appreciation to Her Excellency Maria Leonor Lenie Robredo, Vice-President of the Republic of the Philippines, for delivering the keynote speech during Tapatan sa Aristocrat 3rd anniversary, held this 4th of July at the national landmark, the Aristocrat, Ross Boulevard, corner San Andres, Malate, Manila. Signed, Francis Ortigas, Melo Acuña, and Monsignor Pedro Quitorio. Thank you very much. We'd like to present another plaque for the host this morning. For the past 3 years, Mrs. Priscilla Reyes Pacheco, President the Aristocrat, for her invaluable support as host to Tapatan sa Aristocrat. And the Vice President. Pakiharap lang po sa camera. Thank you very much. May we just request the indulgence of Her Excellency, the Vice President, to please sit. We'll just have very orderly photo ops, please. Okay?